Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Face Your Ears podcast. My name is Justin Hochella, and I'm joined by Rich Bozic.
Hello, how's it going? Good to be here again on another episode. What's been going on? How's the studio doing these days?
It's good. It's doing really well. I am actually embarking on a little side project studio wise. I've been building a vintage studio. So I recently picked up a classic Macintosh from the early 90s and some very basic equipment from the early 90s just to limit myself in terms of the technology. And it's been very trying. It's very much a one step forward, two step back kind of thing, but it's been fun. Other than that, let's see, been producing. I just finished a song actually, mutual client of ours, and that was a lot of fun. I even had the opportunity to do a Ghostbusters square dance call song, which was a lot of fun. One of the most fun things I've done in a while. So yeah, there's a few random things I've been up to. How about you?
My stuff has been a little more mundane. I've actually been cleaning my equipment. I've had some interference with some of the channels on the mixing board. Some of the gain knobs are getting a little crackly. So I ordered some Kontakt cleaner. I've been going through one knob at a time and cleaning things up and getting things to sound pristine again.
Nice.
That's what's been going on here, along with the teaching, the writing, all that stuff.
Great.
On to today's topic. Why are we here today, Justin? What are we talking about?
Well, today we're talking about something very near and dear to my heart and very, very far away from my vintage little music studio I'm building. Today we are introducing the topic of virtual instruments and really how far they've come, specifically emulating quote unquote real instruments. And today we're going to be focusing on guitar and bass, as well as piano and drums. So we're going to be talking about those and kind of listening to what those sound like in today's studio.
That's fantastic. So, what are virtual instruments and how do we go about using them or making them?
Virtual instruments are interesting because it's something that you use in your DAW. You load it up as a plugin, and at first blush, it seems like, oh, this is just a synthetic instrument. However, these virtual instruments are based off of samples and recordings of real acoustic or electric, like guitar, instruments. Generally, what happens with these instruments is a company that is in the business of building these and creating these will meticulously sample the instrument using different microphones, different placements of the microphones, different articulations of the different notes across the spectrum of performing. And they'll essentially combine all of these samples into a virtual instrument that's a plugin that you can load into your software and then just play with your keyboard. And it's pretty remarkable that they're able to capture that sort of human feeling sound through these instruments by meticulously sampling every little note played across all these different dynamic ranges and styles and so forth. And what's really cool too is all the different flourishes and articulations that come with playing, say, a guitar, like a string bend, strumming on this, with the strings muted, like that kind of percussive sound. Like things are put together in a package where you can just load it into a track in your DAW, and all of a sudden you've got a guitar player or a piano player. And so what's interesting too is just to sort of dovetail off of that is it's not just the instruments that sound really great. You have to be able to actually still play and be musical, but even that is changing with something like Logic Pro and its session players, right? So you can load like a piano player or a drummer, for example, and now you've got a virtual, musician essentially in your DAW. But that's a whole different topic, really, but it does dovetail nicely to the virtual instruments. To wrap it up, it's amazing how much detail and care goes into these instruments sounding so authentic and real. And we're going to take a little bit of a tour through some of them in today's episode, just to give everyone a sense of what they actually sound like.
That's a good encapsulation. I think the first thing we should talk about, you mentioned strumming and bending, and you were talking guitars. Could we talk a little bit about virtual guitars and bass? And perhaps we could even let the listeners hear some examples.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about a guitar or a bass, there's almost an infinite array of sound that can be produced. And a lot of it is so nuanced. If you strum a guitar in a very soft, gentle kind of way, you get one sound. But if you really slam it and are really chugging away, playing metal or something, you get a totally different sound. And then there's everything in between. What's really great about these instruments is these companies have been able to capture the nuances and performances across many different styles and playing techniques. So I think the best way to kind of share this is to listen. So I'm going to start us off with a little bit of acoustic guitar. And for today's episode, I'm using a virtual instrument called Kontakt. And that is the flagship sample instrument from a company called Native Instruments. So Kontakt has been around for many, many years. It's used by professionals around the world in professional recordings, in movie scores, you name it. And you're going to hear why in a moment. It sounds pretty remarkable. So here's an acoustic guitar. I just put some MIDI chords into Logic Pro, and this is what it sounds like. So there you go. That is a computer playing back some MIDI notes using a virtual acoustic guitar. I can even go in to that instrument and I can actually select a different playing style. So let's listen to what that might sound like if it was more of a muted guitar. So there you go.
Wow. I mean, as a guitarist, the things that I'm listening for is what does the pick sound like against the strings? All of those little details that you get familiar with when you play an instrument for a while,
Yeah.
I'm catching them. I'm hearing that kind of thing. I'm hearing the way the hand is touching the strings to make that palm
Yeah.
mute happen. I'm hearing the nuance of the velocity at which the pick is hitting the strings. It's unbelievable what is possible now.
I love how we can go from that open sound to that muted sound, and even that sort of crescendo and the way the sound changes over time. It really is remarkable. So that's acoustic guitar, just a little bit there. Here is electric guitar. This is again Native Instruments Kontakt, and this is an instrument called Electric Sunburst Deluxe. So let's check it out.
All right.
There you go. Very much electric guitar. It has that nice,
Yeah.
distorted, crunchy sort of sound. And with electric guitars, effects are a really important thing for us to think about and craft the sounds. With this instrument, it comes with a whole array of effects. What if we wanted to really crank up that reverb and make it sound like it was in like a giant space? We could do that. So let's hear what it might sound like just drenched in reverb. So there you go. And that's built right into the instrument.
Someone playing in a tunnel under New York City. Yeah.
There's so many different effects here that we can play around with and really dial in the sound.
What are some of the parameters you can tweak, I guess?
There's so many parameters. There's all the different effects. There's even very nuanced things like noise. There's a noise section here, and you can increase, for example, the fret noise. So if you want that more authentic kind of fret noise sound of the fingers rubbing against the strings as the person's playing, you can do that. You can tweak the pickup, which pickup you're using, the bridge, the neck, or both. You can tweak the bridge pickup's volume and tone. So there's just so much detail that you can dial in to get the perfect sound.
Can you tweak the tears
Yeah.
rolling down the cheeks of the starving artist
Yeah.
trying to pump out a
Yeah.
tune at
Yeah.
midnight?
You can even select all the different flavors of ramen noodles that you can eat as you're putting it together. So let's check out some bass guitar. And this is, again, Kontakt, and they have an instrument called prime bass. So I'm using prime bass, and this is kind of a little Motown bass, given that I am in the heart of the Motor City, Detroit. So let's listen. There you go. I really want to like make this very clear, like that this is a virtual instrument. So I'm going to take the tempo way down. So I was 120 beats per minute. So now I'm going to change this to 100 beats per minute. And I have a very simple MIDI sequence in here, holding down a few notes, and the instrument is doing the performance. And so that's what's amazing about this. So I'm going to play this back again. Now it's 100 beats per minute. So there you go. Totally virtual. I can change the tempo. I could change the pitches of the notes if I wanted.
Give us a taste of that. Give us a tweak the pattern
Okay.
just a little bit.
What I'm going to do, just to showcase it, I'm going to transpose this a couple semitones. Same riff, just transposed up. It's so easy to change things like pitch and tempo. Then if it's like, well, I want a different riff there. Can we try something a little different? And so there's all these different patterns that I can play around with. So here's a different pattern, just using the same sort of chord progression, if you will. So there you go. A little taste of bass in your face.
Nice. That was a great showcase of guitars and basses. I'm wondering, when you're dealing with guitars and basses, can you mess with the amps and the speakers?
Yeah.
Like a solid state versus tube? Can you do
Yeah.
those kind
So
of
I'm going to go
things?
back to the guitar for a bit here. And there is a section called amps and effects. So it's not just effects, but you can also change the different amps that you're using. For example, I'm using kind of an overdriven, they call it Hot Solo Plus amp. So I'm just kind of play some notes here. So I can dial that back a little bit. I can make it less distorted, kind of tweak the gain. Can take the treble down, maybe increase the bass, take that gain a little down. There we go. So let's see. It's a little darker. So very easy to dial that in. Let's see. I can also try a totally different amp. So this is like a Van 51 amp, kind of a Van Halen style. Maybe a little dirtier there. So it's easy enough to do. And then I can take those out completely. And it's totally clean. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different amps and cabinets that you can use just in this instrument. Not to mention everything Logic Pro has available to it. It's wild to think about the number of effects and amps and cabinets that you can just play around with and find your sound. So here's another one called Twang. It's a little bit of a different color there on this one. So it's just almost hitting that hot distorted sound, but just giving it a little bit of a different color.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless. The beauty of all of this that I see is you don't need to be a billionaire to try out a bunch of different amps and tones and pedals and sounds. I think that's really an advantage. The emulation of these sounds has really come a long way. I've read things on various musician websites where people have compared the real thing to the virtual, and it's hard to differentiate, and it's getting harder and harder to differentiate. And I think just as everything technology goes, when we as human beings love something, we're going to go hard on it, and we're going to make it as accessible and as easy as possible to get that sound that we want, right? So those classic vintage amp sounds from those Marshalls and Mesas and whatnot, there's someone out there digging, trying to get that better, to be able to bring that into the virtual instrument. I know some people are mixed on that, but if someone is creating music at home and doesn't have a crazy budget, and you can only commit to so many instruments, right? This is a great opportunity to be able to dabble in different sounds and get some of those things
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, the relentless march of progress marches on. And I think a lot of it is probably fear or insecurity that, somebody who's dedicated their life to the guitar and different amps and instruments and so on and so forth. Like, it can be very disconcerting, to say the least, to have something like this come along. And the reality is, like, if somebody were to use this, like, write music for a commercial, the mass majority of listeners would just hear it and be like, oh, that's a guitar or whatever. They wouldn't think twice about it. And so I think, to your point, this just creates a level of accessibility and flexibility that's unprecedented in music history. And it affords people these opportunities that were impossible in the past. I want to audition
Yeah.
6 amplifiers. Like, do you have $60,000 to order these and get them shipped and send them back? I mean, that's absurd. It's insane. So
Yeah.
it's really remarkable, and it is a bigger conversation. Like, what are we potentially losing and giving up by having these kinds of tools? Because there is a cost that is not financial. I think bringing an understanding of music and music theory and those sorts of things is a really important element to all of this. I think it's most dangerous when these things are just viewed as a shortcut, and there's no footing for.
Yeah. There's no desire to create something that has
Yes.
substance, I
Yeah,
guess. Can we talk a little bit about pianos, virtual pianos?
absolutely. Yes. I am using Kontakt. Again, this is a piano instrument they have called the Grandeur. And the Grandeur is essentially based off of like a concert Steinway piano. And once again, we have so many nuanced details. So we can change the tone of the instrument. We can even listen to it with the lid open or closed. We can tweak the sound of the pedals that are used when performing.
And the noise of the pedals too, I think. It's crazy. So someone probably sat there with a microphone and just recorded endless samples in all the different configurations. Some studio swabby sitting there adjusting the mic, moving things around, raising, lowering the stick on the lid.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work goes into these things. And some companies are really known for their fantastic samples. I know Yamaha has been recognized for some of their samples that they have on some of their keyboards, and some of those samples live on in newer iterations of the keyboards or are sought after as add-ons to the newer keyboards.
In just pure software terms, Kontakt, Native Instruments for sure. Spitfire Audio is another one that's awesome, especially when you get into like more orchestral things. And it's pretty remarkable in today's world, whether it's a video game or a movie. A lot of times when you're hearing a giant orchestra play, it's some person at their laptop, using software similar to what we're using today. That's not always the case. However, when budget is
Yeah.
limited, you can't hire John Williams and the London Philharmonic Orchestra. It's just not feasible.
Yeah.
But instead, you might have Spitfire Audio's orchestral package that costs, maybe $1,000. The London Philharmonic Orchestra is probably like $1,000 an hour. So, it's just pretty amazing.
$1,000. That's
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I
it's
wouldn't
probably
doubt
more
it.
than that, I imagine, with all those players. Yeah. So let's hear some of these piano sounds.
What I want to start with is just because the piano is such a nuanced instrument, right? And so I'm sitting here at my keyboard right now, and I'm just going to play the same note in sort of different styles. So I'm just going to play it really soft, and you can hear it's very gentle. And now on the other end, and you can hear a difference in the sound. Like it genuinely sounds like a piano. Even articulation, right? So just sort of staccato, you get that sound. So it's very subtle differences here. You're not just triggering the same sound over and over and over again. That's not what happens on a real piano. You're getting a very specific sound based on how that note was played. Let's take a listen to just a little bit of a performance here. And I just wanted to mention that for this, I did use Logic Pro's session player. So I told it what chords I wanted it to play, and this is what came out. There you go. The Grandeur from Native Instruments Kontakt being played by Logic Pro. That's an interesting example because I didn't program anything in. Like it,
Yeah. So that's like a starting point. If you're creating music,
absolutely,
you listen to that, and then you go in and you can start tweaking things, changing the rhythms, maybe changing some of the ways that the notes are played, the velocity, the length, maybe making the chord progression a little bit different. So that should be a starting place.
Really, the focus here is more to show off what it sounds like. And the musicality of it comes from the person, massaging this is the word that comes out. I don't want to use that word, but I just did. Sorry. But you know what I mean? It is up to the person to sort of tweak that. You can do that in multiple ways. You can print this to just pure MIDI notes and tweak those notes. You can perform this yourself, if you want to just play the keyboard and perform it. The sky's the limit. But in terms of sound, it's beautiful. That's me playing, but just the sound of the instrument is amazing. I love it.
Yeah. Let's move on. I want to talk about drums.
Yeah.
Drums are always a cool thing when it comes to virtual instruments because, well, frankly, drum kits are very expensive. And once you get a drum kit, unlike a keyboard or a guitar, you can't really do too much with the sound unless you have an electronic drum kit. When you're buying a real acoustic drum kit, you got to know what you're listening for if you're, looking for something high end or whatever. But virtual drum kits, you can dabble without having to pay $5,000 for each kit that you want to test out.
Yeah, and I am using Kontakt here. They have a drum kit called Abbey Road Modern Drummer. And again, these drums are recorded in a studio that is professionally treated. These drums are professionally mic'd. You're getting all kinds of different positions of the microphone across the drums. Again, the articulation and the nuance here is very, very, very detailed. I'm using Logic Pro Drummer here, so another virtual session player at our disposal here. Let's take a listen, see what this sounds like. There were even some actual hand claps in there that we were able to hear. Again, just to kind of give you a sense of the sound, you can tweak that, dial in the fills, the different drum sounds. It's pretty amazing. And you can even go so far as to tweak individual drum sounds on the kit. So you can click on a drum here, like a tom, and you can even change it out to whatever tom you want. You can even change the individual toms or the, kick drum, you name it. It's pretty awesome.
I have a little story about emulated drums that was mind-blowing to me the other night. So I have a Yamaha DTX Stream 3 electronic drum kit. I have a lot of Yamaha instruments. I really like Yamaha. But the thing that blew my mind when I was playing with the drum kit was I noticed when I played the bass drum, I was hearing something like the sound, like almost like as if the snare was activating a little bit. I'm like, what is this? Like, what's going on here? I turned the snare volume all the way down and it was gone. But then when I turned the snare volume up and I wasn't even playing the snare, and I would hit the kick, it emulated the springs rattling around and activating
Mm.
on the snare drum when I would hit.
Sympathetic vibrations.
Yes, just like a real drum kit.
Wow.
Because when you're playing a real drum kit, if you hit the bass drum, other things are going to vibrate on the kit. I was floored. I'm like, this is awesome. It's just like a real drum kit. When you hit that kick, you hear that spring rattle a little bit. I thought that was really cool.
I love that. And that's the kind of detail that you're going to look for, I think, with these kinds of instruments, and the kinds of things you can expect are these small nuances and details.
This was a great little sampling of virtual instruments. Just to recap, we talked a little bit about what virtual instruments are and how they're put together. And we gave you some examples of guitar, bass, piano, and drums, just to get a little taste of what these things can sound like. So I hope you go out and explore and try to use some of these virtual instruments on your own when you're doing your own home recordings. Also, the podcast is now on YouTube. We don't have a video format yet, but the audio version of the podcast is up on YouTube if you happen to listen that way. Please share the podcast with those you think who might benefit from this. So, Justin, thank you so much for today's topic.
Yeah, it was really fun to explore this. This is something I can go on and on about. I absolutely love virtual instruments. And we're going to put links to some of our favorite virtual instruments in the show notes. So please check those out. Take a deeper dive. There's a lot of free demos available too, so you can check them out on your own in your own DAW of choice. Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Take care. Thank you for listening to the Face Your Ears podcast. If you found this episode entertaining and informative, be sure to share and leave a review. Also, check us out on social media and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. For more information related to our podcast, head on over to www.faceyourears.com. Links can be found in the show description. And remember, whether you're a musician just starting out or a seasoned professional looking to talk shop, it's time to face your ears.